Good. That's good. Okay. Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the Township of Wainfleet regular council meeting of September 19th, 2023 to order. Please stand for the national anthem. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay. Seeing none, please note that these meeting proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the Township website and youtube.com. We hope to see everyone out enjoying the annual Fall Fair this weekend, starting with the parade Thursday at 6 p.m. Our firefighters are holding a fish fry Friday at 5 p.m. until sold out. Regional Council meets this Thursday at 6:30. Saturday, September 30th is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Our next regular meeting of Council will be October 10th at 7 p.m. Are there any announcements or remarks from members of Council? Okay, moving on to the adoption of the previous council minutes. Are there any comments, corrections for the draft minutes from the regular meeting of council held August 29th, 2023? Seeing none, so I have a motion that the minutes of the regular council meeting held August 29th, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan? Councilor Gilmore? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, we have no public meetings, so we're going to move on to delegations. We have Hugh Goodwillie here to make a presentation respecting a request for early removal of the boardwalk for the along the Augustine Road allowance for the purposes of shore wall work.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you for allowing me to come tonight and speak to you. It was only a couple of years ago that I was here to talk to you about beach issues so that we could proceed to repair and replace our shore wall, damaged and eroded through successive storms. And indeed, I'm here tonight speaking for myself and the 3 cottage owners west of my property over to the Long Beach Resort, as they face the same retreating shoreline issues. I'm here tonight to ask you a small favor. Everything is in place. The NPCA permit has been approved. The province has given their permission for us to work on their property. The contractor, Quest Marine, has ordered the rocks and is ready to go. So what's the problem? Well, it's simply this. It's going to take the contractor 4 to 5 weeks to complete the approximately 200-foot frontage. And 2 years ago, the major storm of the year and of the decade occurred on October the 30th. That means we need to get started before October the 1st to get the equipment on the beach and the rocks in place. But Wainfleet has a history of waiting until after Thanksgiving to remove the boulders and the boardwalk that block the access laneway. Access may be less convenient during this time, but it will not be removed. My request then today is to ask you, for this year only, to move the date forward to September 29th or sooner if possible. There are few people accessing the beach even now, fewer each week. The locals are used to the fact that they sometimes have to walk in the sand rather than on the boardwalk to get to the beach. And the Long Beach Property Owners Association has agreed that earlier removal this year would not be a problem. Richard Nan is prepared to proceed if you give him the word. And our contractor has advised me that he only needs a couple of days to rent the trucks to bring the huge boulders to the beach in front of our place. Please give me the good news tonight, and our cottages and our shore wall will be saved for another 100 years. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Comments or questions for the delegation from members of council? Councilman Cullen, go ahead.
You, Mr. Mayor. I think it's the right thing to do. I understand what happens there.
Thank you.
I have one question for you.
Okay.
Your contractor, I take it he's the same guy for all three buildings?
Yes, he is.
Can you have him at the end of the day, just back drag, he'll have a loader there, back drag the sand so it's flat, so nobody, if they go out and it's late, they don't trip and fall and break their neck and come after all of us?
I shall do that, and I'll check it out.
That shouldn't be a problem. It's all sand. He just
No.
puts his bucket down and backs out.
Yeah, that should be no problem.
I'm in agreement with it as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other comments or questions from any other members of council? Go ahead, Councilor.
So I'd like to make a motion then that we support this. Richard, you give us a date you think he can have it done by so he can get it. I don't know if it takes you 2 days, a week, what it takes to get that done.
Through your worship, if that's council's wishes, then it just take a couple days to schedule staff and free up staff to be able to remove it. And then additionally, it'll give the contractor the time to submit for the permits and provide the insurance and everything, documentation.
Could you give me the date, and then I can get the contractor to order the trucks for start bringing the rocks in?
That will be up to council's discretion during the vote.
So again, if I can, could you have it done by the end of this week?
Yes, sir, we could.
So let's go with that. I'll make a motion that,
Seconded by Councilor Van Fleet. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll just call the question. All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
so.
Thank you.
So if I can.
Yep.
You make sure your contractor's got his road use permits and everything done so that you don't get tripped up on that end of it? Right? I'll do that for sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I may, your worship.
Of course.
Can you also mention your contractor to make sure he's got providing the insurance, naming the township as additional insured? He was notified of that when he.
I'm sure he's done it before, but
Yeah.
Yep.
yes,
So
certainly.
you don't run into problems and
Thank you.
gotta wait a week.
Thank you.
Make sure everybody's covered.
Yep.
So, perfect. All right.
So just for clarification, for the purposes of the motion, the boardwalk will be removed by the end of this week, which should give the contractor the ability to start next week.
Yeah.
In the meantime, before the contractor can start, there are the requirements for the road permit, which include the insurance and all the other standard sort of clauses the township puts in order.
These are from the township. Yes. Okay.
Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
And just one other thing, Will, probably should post that on the website so that people know why it's coming out early and just to cut off any concerns at the pass.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwillie.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to staff reports and recommendations. PWSR 016/2023, respecting community safety zones. Mr. Nam, would you please give us a brief overview of your report?
Thank you, Your Worship, to members of council. Staff was asked to provide some information regarding the community safety zones within the Township of Wainfleet, and more specifically, the area of Side Road 20, which is Park Street and Sugarloaf Street as well. As council is aware, they're in the process of building a new school, and I think that's part of the impetus for the community safety zone moving forward. Just as an explanation, a community safety zone is a section of roadway designated pursuant to the Ontario Regulation 510/99 under the Highway Traffic Act, as potentially amended, where public safety is a special concern, particularly for vulnerable road users like children and other adults, and where traffic moving offenses are subject to double fines. So initially, setting up a community safety zone is minimal as far as costing. It's a matter of putting up some signs and designations. The enforcement is still going to be done by the Niagara Regional Police, but it allows them to increase fines in those areas. As community safety zones are to address specific and localized criteria, staff are recommending that we pursue a warrant process to justify the use of community safety zones and other areas in township as people come in requesting them. In order to do that, it encompasses and will allow staff to investigate car accidents, speeding limits, types of vehicles that are traveling down the roadway, et cetera. But it'll also provide council the knowledge that it's warranted to put that in the community safety zone, or to put community safety zone in those areas. So we're proposing to use a warrant process, and we've attached a policy and a warrant criteria for your consideration.
Any comments? Councilor McClellan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Nan, can you explain to me what the difference is between a school zone that should be there and a community safety zone? Because the fines are doubled in a school zone, am I correct?
You are correct. In some specific areas, there's only a certain road limitation for school zones, and we can put them throughout, and we can request those throughout the community, including on MTO roadways. Community safety zones will encompass things like parks, community centers, elderly homes if we had them in the areas. So that's to encompass a little bit more than just a school zone. School zones are designated specific areas around schools only, but community safety zones can incorporate parks as well. So that's the major difference.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Richard, on page 12 at the top, lays out criteria for a warrant process, and it's slightly different than the one on page 15. I guess when I read over this, the first thing that jumped out at me was on page 12 that the first one has to consider the number of fatal and injury collisions involving pedestrians and cyclists, which is ludicrous that not that we don't consider those, but that we have to wait until we have any of those to get any points to establish one. But then I see that on page 15 you don't list that criteria, which is a good thing. I wouldn't know why we would have to wait until there's a fatality or an injury before we decide whether we need to have a community safety zone in a given area. Like, to me, it's offensive. But at any rate.
Yeah, through your worship, this is basically, part of the warrant process is just collecting data. There may be a new school area or a new school coming into an area that didn't exist before. So you wouldn't have the same data. But you're trying to look at historical data. In that area, has there been fatalities? Has there been collisions? Has there been reported, incidences? So you're basically just using that as a portion of what's been there in history. It doesn't encompass the entire scope, and that's why so many other things are included in that warrant process. And again, council can determine what that score can be at the end. I mean, there's going to be a suggestion to putting it at this point, but that's still not stopping council from determining if they want to include a community safety zone. One of the biggest problems we have in this area is because of number 3 highway, and that's why I've included some of the criteria that the ministry uses in order to encompass their roads within a community safety zone. So we can do whatever we want. It's just it's just to provide council with some background information on those designated areas that they're considering for community safety zones.
Yeah, I read a couple of times, you need a score of 25. But it's like a video game. You get 5 points if you have a fatal or an injury collision, but you get all lower points for all the other reasons, which are of equal importance, and what we're trying to prevent versus, we're obviously trying to prevent the first one, but I don't want to have to wait till we accumulate points in that category before we do something. I guess that's all. And while I'm on the topic, it may be not completely related, but what is the plan for the crosswalk? Is there a plan for a crosswalk here with the new school?
Through your worship to Councilor Gilmore, no, there's not.
So, okay, well, that needs to come up at another meeting, because that's also ridiculous. I know we're going to have trouble with the MTO. I don't care. We need to battle it out with them, because we have to have a proper crosswalk on that road for the new school.
Through your worship to Councilor Gilmore. So through the planning process for the new school, the MTO was included in the design and the criteria for that. And we included options at the availability of using our laneway, for instance, for the entrance. The MTO responded with no concerns about the projected volume of traffic or pedestrians utilizing that intersection. So that was provided to us in comments during the planning process of the school. If we wanted to proceed further, the issue we have is crosswalks usually join sidewalks. We don't have any. We don't own any. So part of that process for a crosswalk is to actually be able to take people through sidewalks. We technically don't own Sugarloaf Street, so we can't just put sidewalks on a road that we don't own. And we don't own the sidewalks on Highway 3. We're unique in the situation where we're the only municipality, I think, in Ontario that the MTO still owns the sidewalks. So they would have to, again, upgrade the sidewalks as part of that whole process, or they would end up downloading them all to the municipality. But again, we still don't own Sugarloaf Street, so we can't install within on the right-of-way.
Go ahead, Will.
And just to build on the comments of the operations manager, part of the MTO's sort of response to the planning application is based on information that the school board provided to the MTO regarding anticipated traffic volumes, pedestrian volumes, all that sort of stuff. So based on the information provided by the school to the MTO, they came to the conclusion that there was no current need for a crosswalk or any other sort of traffic improvements at the highway intersections.
Councilor Van Fleet, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard. Excuse me. So Richard, I just got a question. How do we justify Winger has it's not an official crosswalk, there's a crossing guard there. It's been there probably since my husband went to that school.
Through your worship, I can't speak to the history in the past. I believe she was there for well over 30 years, crossing kids. So I don't know how that was established, but I imagine it was through the school board designation and the request to the township to provide that crossing guard. The school at this point, based on their submission, hasn't requested any of that from the township, or even that there'd be a crossing.
So can we as a township petition the school board?
I'm not sure how that process works, but I'll refer to our CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you want to leave that with staff, we will do some further investigations, and I think as Councillor Gilmore suggested, we can bring that back to a future meeting just to sort of ensure that everyone is either informed or aware of how the current conclusions came to be and what next steps could be for council if you want to pursue it further.
Thank you.
I'm good. I'll let it go.
Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Richard, this safety, community safety zone, is it inclusive of Park Street and 20 Side Road?
Through your worship, currently the township owns and has the right to create a community safety zone on Side Road 20 and Park Street. We can't include Sugarloaf because we don't own it, and as well as the MTO Highway 3. But we could include those two pieces of roadway under the jurisdiction of the municipality with our own community safety project. If we wanted to include anything additional, we have to go through their process, the MTO process, to include that in a community safety zone.
So just a further point of clarification, are the warrant points for a school safety zone equal to or different than just a community safety zone strip of roadway, say around a park? Do you have to still get the same score?
Through your worship, in school zones, I'm not sure what the warrant process is. It's normally just a designated distance from the school becomes a school zone. Whether it doesn't require warrants for the school zones. For community safety zones, most municipalities in the township are using that score sheet, and that's why we decided to adopt that score sheet. We can alter that score sheet, we can change it, and council can change the point system, they can do whatever they prefer. But it's a very similar system to what the region uses, as well as a bunch of other municipalities.
So to continue, just one other point. I believe that we've had a reasonable amount of concern from the residents on Park area and Side Road 20. I think it's because they live on the far side of the road, which is subject to a lot of traffic and summer park usage and our soccer games, et cetera. So as long as we're sort of considering where this sort of started for me, which was residents in that area, I'm quite happy to proceed.
Okay.
Councilor McCollum, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Richard, how big an area what's the radius we can do for a school zone? Like, is it 100 meters from the school, or?
Through your
That's
worship, to
self-determined.
Councilor McClellan, I'd have to look it up in the book.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering if we can determine that, and then,
The criteria is usually laid out in the traffic manuals,
Yeah.
and I'd have to refer to the traffic manuals.
yeah, because there's probably a lot of kids in behind Marshville Chocolate and up the feeder, or the mill race, that walk to Webb, and now they're gonna have to walk over here. Somewhere they should be able to get across the road without getting killed, and we shouldn't have to wait till one of them dies before we get somebody, like, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
What's that?
Through your worship, I think we may be confusing a few things. So there's a school zone, which is basically designated to notify people that you're entering a school area. As far as the walking web, that is usually determined by the school boards and their transportation systems. Some schools, for instance, in urban communities, they set the limits like 1.6 kilometers from the school. Rural communities, they set them differently. So we'd have to determine what the school board as our illustrious CAO, if you leave us some time, we can investigate further what their walking web would be, and as part of our investigation.
It definitely will do that. Okay.
Any other, Councilor Van Fleet, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is probably totally off base, but I was asked about the speed limit on 24, because it's 60 from in Pelham at Chandler, and then as soon as you get to the bridge, or sorry, across the bridge, just past the store, it goes to 80. So is that something, again, we petition the region? Like, how did they get it changed and we can't get it changed?
Through your worship, I can almost guarantee that we could put a request from council to consider that at regional council level. And then they'll probably go back to staff, and then they'll do a warrant investigation to determine what the speed limit should be.
All right, I'll bring that to a meeting. Thanks.
And it's probably because Weber Road comes onto Regional Road 24, and the volume of traffic makes them slow. Yeah, I know.
That's also something I can speak to Public Works at, right? I can reach out to the Commissioner of Public Works and then
Okay,
have
so-
that investigated as well.
While you're at it, we could figure out how 24 got paved, repaved, and then Weber got repaved, but we asked
Not
in
us.
2019 to get Forks done and we got patched.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah. I can do that for us.
thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, I have a motion that the Public Works Staff Report PWSR 016-2023 respecting community safety zones be received, and that council approve the adoption of community safety zone policy and warrant process as attached in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, and that staff be directed to investigate the possibility of the creation of a community safety zone, one in the area of Side Road 20, Park Street, and Sugarloaf Street, utilizing the warrant process. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Gilmore, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Moving on to the review of correspondence, are there any items of correspondence council members wish to pull for consideration? Okay. Seeing none, are there any notices of motion from members of council? Yep. Okay, so we do have a closed meeting item that is not currently on tonight's list, so I will ask the CAO to provide some information before going into close.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, there was an amended agenda that was published this afternoon advising of the need for a closed session to deal with a breaking matter. It will be pursuant to Section 239, 2C, E, and F of the Municipal Act, dealing with proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land, litigation or potential litigation, and advice subject to the solicitor-client privilege. And it's an update from our township solicitor regarding an open legal file. So we'd like to have a motion to move into closed session now to deal with that matter. And again, if a mover and a seconder would be in order, and we can proceed.
Councilor Anderson, Councilor Gilmore, any discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. So we'll now move into close.